The temple had an unexpected effect on Jin-Woo. It made him feel more alive than ever before. He didn't feel like a low-ranking hunter. Instead, he felt like someone who could tackle anything thrown his way. After dodging through a few narrow streets, he caught sight of the school up ahead. To his surprise, he reached the school in just a minute. In one corner of the schoolyard, the entrance to the dungeon floated quietly. A couple of people from the Hunters Guild and Association stood nearby, keeping an eye on things. Everything seemed peaceful at first, nothing out of the ordinary happening. Then, without warning, Jin-Woo appeared, turning off his stealth skill and walking up to the group. "Wait, what?" one of the guild members shouted, and they quickly moved to block his path. "You can't be here." Jin-Woo pulled back his hood, revealing his face, and someone nearby gasped in surprise. "Hey!" The association employee at the gate recognized Jin-Woo right away. It was the same woman with glasses he'd met earlier at the B-rank gate on the highway. Jin-Woo figured talking to her would be simpler, so he ignored the guild members and called out to her. "You need to stop the raid right now." "Huh?" She blinked in confusion, pushing up her glasses like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Jin-Woo shook his head, looking at the gate with a serious expression. "If you don't act fast, everyone inside will die," he said firmly. The employee's eyes widened in shock as she stared back at him. "Can't you feel that super creepy energy coming from inside?" Jin-Woo asked, turning to face her. His voice was filled with urgency. The employee looked confused but managed to answer. "They've been in there for about 2 hours. Jin-Woo frowned, thinking about how much time had passed. 2 hours could mean the difference between life and death. Suddenly a voice boomed from behind them, startling everyone. "Who are you? What's going on here?" it demanded. "Hey, you with the guild." A guild member grabbed Jin-Woo's shoulder, trying to spin him around. He was fuming at this stranger who popped out of nowhere, ignored almost everyone else, and started yelling crazy talk about their strike team being in danger. Jin-Woo's grip wasn't very strong, but he went along with it and faced the man anyway. He figured showing his face would work better than explaining everything. The guild member started to say, "When someone asks you but then he stopped. His eyes narrowed as he studied Jin-Woo's face. "Wait a second. I've seen you before. But where?" When he heard his name called, he stuttered in shock. Hunter Jin-Woo Sung. No way. He couldn't believe he was face to face with an S-rank hunter at a C-rank gate. To make things weirder, the guy had grabbed his shoulder and yelled at him like he'd done something wrong. The staff member looked totally caught off guard. He pulled his hand back and took a step away, apologizing nervously. I'm really sorry, sir." Jin-Woo didn't say anything. With time running out, he couldn't afford to waste even a second on this rude stranger. He turned to the woman from the association. "I'll bring them back." The representative looked worried. This was the same guy who had walked out of a B-rank red gate with a smile. But now he seemed completely shaken. He was acting like the squad inside this C-rank gate was in serious trouble. "What's going on? Can you at least tell me?" "There's no time for that," Jin-Woo said sharply, cutting her off. To be honest, he could have snuck inside without anyone noticing using his stealth ability. But something felt really off, and he knew he had to act fast. There were a few ways to distract these people, so they wouldn't notice the gate. But Jin-Woo decided not to try any of them, just in case things got messy later. Meanwhile, the employee from the association kept opening and closing her mouth like a fish, clearly unsure of what to do next. Is it ever okay to let another hunter go inside a dungeon, when there's already an officially permitted guild raid happening? Technically no way, but there was something in Jin-Woo's eyes that made her trust him, even though it broke all the rules. "Go ahead," she said quietly. Jin-Woo nodded once and darted through the gate like a flash. The moment he stepped inside, the system greeted him with a familiar message. "You have entered the dungeon." The place was eerie. Bodies of magical creatures were scattered everywhere, their life force already taken out. Jin-Woo's eyes narrowed as he took in the scene. Something felt off here. Unlike magical beast bodies from high-ranking dungeons, which were super valuable, those from low-ranking dungeons were only good for their essence stones. This was something Jin-Woo had seen many times before. He closed his eyes, focusing hard, but for some reason, he couldn't sense the strike squad anywhere. Could they already be? "Bew." Jin-Woo shook his head, confused. Jin-Woo stood there, but he couldn't feel any mana coming from the dead hunters. It was weird. As he looked around, something felt super familiar, like he'd been here before. Wait a minute. This place looked exactly the same as the dungeon, where he first got his powers. He walked over to where the double dungeon entrance used to be, and there it was, just like last time. But then it hit him. Why he couldn't sense any of the hunters. This dungeon, it's massive, just as huge as the one from before. No wonder he couldn't feel anything. Even if they moved as fast as low-ranking hunters, it would take them nearly an hour to reach the mysterious door. If this dungeon was really laid out the same way, then Jin-Woo was a long distance away from the strike squad. No wonder he couldn't sense the other hunters. They just didn't have much mana. Jin-Woo kept staring down the dark passageway in front of him. There was only one tunnel, and just like before, the path was super dark. But Jin-Woo wasn't worried. His heightened senses let him figure out where to go, even in the blackness. His eyes glowed a cool blue color, kind of like an animal with night vision. I can see, and Jin-Woo thought to himself. The darkness didn't hide anything from him. Now he could make out every detail of the tunnel. He took a deep breath, and then zoom. He darted forward as fast as a bullet. He covered a lot of ground super fast. It's crazy because back then it took me nearly an hour just to get this far. Now he's moving way faster than before. The difference is huge. Then, something caught his attention. Look, there's the strike squad. They've stopped moving. Jin-Woo wonders if they're fighting or even dead. But things didn't go as planned. As Jin-Woo approached, he overheard their voices. So you want to turn back now that we're already here? As someone asked. Jin-Woo stopped a short distance away from the hunters, and let out a snort, at the familiar conversation. He felt relieved, though the strike squad hadn't entered yet. They wouldn't be arguing so casually if things weren't serious. Jin-Woo overheard a woman's frustrated voice. Then what are we supposed to do? We've tried everything, but nothing works. Maybe we should just give up and join forces with a bigger group, someone suggested. I think that's the best idea. But a bunch of hunters were stuck in front of a mysterious door they couldn't open, no matter how hard they tried. Jin-Woo could see why they were considering turning back. They must have thought they hit the jackpot when they found the double dungeon. After an hour of trekking through who knows where, no one wants to walk away empty-handed. But here comes Jin-Woo, who's been in their shoes before. He steps out of nowhere, his voice low and serious. It's a trap. So the hunters jump like they've seen a ghost. Their eyes widen as they take a step back, clutching their gear tightly. One of them mutters under their breath, while another stammers, "Who the heck are you?" Jin-Woo tilts his head toward that enormous steel door, the memories flashing behind his eyes. "I've survived a double dungeon," he says coolly. The hunters exchange looks, confusion written all over their faces. A survivor of a double dungeon. That's not something you hear every day. The hunters glanced at each other in surprise and started whispering. It was dark, so it took them a moment to realize who stood before them. "Wait," one hunter trailed off. "What?" another replied, confused. "Isn't that Hunter Jin-Woo's song?" someone whispered. "Huh?" everyone else asked in unison, turning to stare at the person who'd spoken. Their eyes darted from the hunter who'd said the name to Jin-Woo himself. "Now that you mention it," one of them murmured. "It's really him, isn't it?" Another added, disbelief creeping into their voice. "But what is an S-rank hunter doing here?" someone else wondered aloud. As the whispers grew louder, Jin-Woo stepped forward. The hunters near the entrance instinctively moved out of his way. He rested his hand on the entrance, his expression steady. "I know what's behind these doors," he said quietly. Being here again felt strange, but now wasn't the time for memories. The system had brought him here, and he couldn't let anyone else, invited or not, get in the way. Jin-Woo turned to face them, his voice serious. "This place is super scary. You should totally turn around," Jin-Woo said, his voice firm but serious. "I've got this from here." The strike squad grumbled quietly, clearly unhappy with the idea of leaving. But they kept their thoughts to themselves because Jin-Woo was famous as an S-rank hunter, and no one wanted to cross him. Still, there's always that one person who doesn't want to give up. This time it was the leader of a mid-size guild, the man in charge of this whole raid operation. He couldn't just walk away empty-handed. Finally, he stepped forward and said, "Excuse me, Hunter Sung. The Bravery Guild got permission to raid this dungeon, so you can't just tell us to leave." One of them argued. "Yeah, just because you're an S-rank doesn't mean you can boss everyone around." While Jin-Woo pressed his lips together, annoyed by their complaints. He tried to help them out of kindness, but he wasn't gonna beg them to see things his way. He didn't owe them anything. Jin-Woo had already done more than enough to lend a hand. He knew how much other low-rank hunters, including himself, had suffered because of decisions made about this place. He didn't want these hunters to go through the same thing. Still, he let them decide for themselves. He reached out and gripped the doorknob tightly. Kalong. No matter how hard he tried, the door wouldn't open. Was it trapped by some kind of magic? There was no other reason why this door wouldn't budge. A sudden chime filled the air. Jin-Woo pulled out a black key and slipped it into the keyhole of the locked Cartoon temple door. With a loud creaks, the doors swung open, shocking the Bravery Guild members, who had thought they were impenetrable. The guild members stared in awe, their mouths hanging open. What just happened? One of them whispered. Jin-Woo ignored their stunned reactions and calmly warned them, "You can go inside now." Without saying a word, he stepped through the doorway first, leaving the others to gawk in amazement behind him. Whoa. Listen up. If you go in there, you might not come out alive. The strike squad's eyes widened as they heard these serious words from an S-rank hunter. But then something unexpected happened. Their guild master stepped forward bravely. "I'll take care of this," he said. Jin-Woo watched him, but didn't try to stop him. It was their decision after all, and they'd have to live with the results. The guildmaster turned to his team, hoping someone would volunteer to join him. But when they looked at each other, no one stepped forward. The guildmaster frowned at his team, clearly unhappy with their performance. He then stepped in front of the door, and Jin-Woo held it open for him. Tvev. The heavy door creaked open. The guildmaster looked determined as he glanced briefly at Jin-Woo. After hesitating for a moment, he gathered his courage and stepped inside. As soon as he did, Jin-Woo got a few alerts. Kipping ping, ping, chuzam. Someone has entered the temple. Yes. Entry is forbidden, as ignoring warnings will trigger the doorkeepers. Only Jin-Woo saw these messages, so the guildmaster had no idea what was coming next. He took another step forward. Tves. A massive hammer swung down toward his head. Tves. Smashed into the stone floor where he'd just been standing. Ark! Jis! Jin-Woo yanked the guild master to safety, just in time, saving him from getting crushed. Tves! The guild master screamed as shadowy figures doorkeepers reached out to grab him. Jin-Woo quickly tossed him outside and slammed the door shut. "The whole room is like that," he said, turning around with a serious look. "Do you still want to go in?" The guild master, sitting on the ground, shook his head hard. His friends helped him up and carried him off. Once they were out of sight, Jin-Woo walked through the door alone. Two. The keeper of the key has entered. Not. Two. The room was huge. The hall was filled with statues that lined the walls, but one gigantic statue towered in the farthest corner. Everything looked exactly as Jin-Woo remembered. "I'm back," as his heart raced like crazy. But something about Jin-Woo himself had changed. Now after evolving, he could see the truth about the statues. They weren't magical creatures or living things. They were just puppets connected to something bigger. Only one being in the room had magic, but it hid its power so well that Jin-Woo could only tell by its creepy vibe. His eyes locked on one statue in particular. "So it was you," Jin-Woo said. The statue stayed silent. Jin-Woo's lips curved into a sly grin. "Well, if that's how you want to play it." He struck swiftly, plunging his dagger toward the statue's chest. Crack. The blade smashed into something solid. A stone slate held by the statue with 6 wings. Its feathers glowed faintly in the dim light. Finally the statue said, its voice smooth and calm like a warm smile spreading across its face. "You've made it." Suddenly magical creatures started pouring out of this huge gate in Shinjuku. Stomp. Stomp. The ground shook with each step. "Whoa," someone breathed. "What are?" The creatures were enormous giants, the kind you'd usually only see as bosses in super tough dungeons. Giants. People shouted. Everyone watching took a step back, scared. But Yuri just took a cool sip from his flask. He wasn't worried at all. To him, this was no big deal. These towering beasts made others tremble. But Yuri was confident. His plan would work perfectly. "Come on, bring it," he shouted. And just like he expected, the giants swung and smashed. But their attacks hit nothing but an invisible wall. Bam. Wham. They tried over and over, charging at the barrier, but it held strong because of Yuri's magic circle. He burst out laughing at the sight. "Ah, Ah, oft. After about half an hour of struggling, the giants finally gave up and walked away like they were tired. The crowd was stunned. Oh my God. Someone cried. Are they going back through the gate? No one had ever seen anything like this before. Even experienced reporters were snapping pictures like crazy, trying to capture this unprecedented moment. As the last giant disappeared, President Matsumoto stood up and started clapping. Clap, clap. Others joined in, and soon the applause turned into cheers of relief and excitement. Woohoo! The crowd roared with joy. Yuri smiled, ready to face all the reporters now, rushing toward him. Only I could pull this off. Yuri bellowed at the top of his lungs. I stopped this S-rank gate. That other guy just took down a few ants, but I sent those giants packing. Who's the man now? Yuri's face was flushed from drinking, and he flashed a grin, showing off his shiny gold tooth. Stomp. On the ground trembled. Stomp. Even the military tanks on standby rattled from the force. Yuri finally noticed something strange. The reporters weren't staring at him anymore. Their eyes were fixed on the gate instead. He followed their gazes and dropped his vodka flask. Clank. Oh. No. The hunter's eyes nearly popped out of his head as a gigantic creature emerged from the gate, towering over the other giants. Yuri couldn't believe how massive it was, so big. It had to duck just to fit through the entrance. No explanation needed. This was clearly the dungeon boss. The terrifying monster scanned the area, then charged at the invisible wall with a thunderous S-boom. The ground shook violently. Boom. Boom. The magical barrier, visible only to Yuri, started cracking. How was this even possible? The hunter collapsed to his knees in fear. The boss stopped smashing into the barrier and stepped back. Then it sprinted forward at full speed and slammed into the wall with a deafening boom. The light from the magical barrier vanished in an explosive blast. Noom! Yuri cried out, just as the giant grabbed the human who had been maintaining the barrier. The Russian screamed in agony as his bones snapped, and he fought to break free from the giant's crushing grip. Those cries were abruptly silenced as the massive creature's mouth opened wide, swallowing Yuri whole. The smaller giants who had been hiding behind the gate now swarmed out, following their leader. A strange creaking sound, crick, came from the statue's joints as it started to move. Jin-Woo watched warily, his eyes locked on the towering figure. The creature stood out from the other statues, but its biggest difference was those wings. It was the only angel statue, and it had 6 wings sticking out, towering over everything at 3 meters tall. Fwhip! Jin-Woo jumped back quickly, bending his knees and gripping a dagger in each hand. Jin-Woo was ready for battle. His mind sharp, his body strong and his senses on high alert. The angel noticed Jin-Woo's fighting spirit and smiled, but its grin was super unsettling, like something that didn't belong on its face. It made Jin-Woo's skin crawl. Then the angel glanced at the damaged stone slate in its hand, and tossed it aside without a second thought. Crash! The slate smashed into pieces as it hit the ground. The angel statue let out a stiff laugh as it stared at the broken pieces on the ground. Jin-Woo's eyes tightened in confusion. Ha, it said mockingly. Wait a minute. Had everything been pointless all along? If the rules on that stone slate really mattered, why was the statue being so careless with them? Jin-Woo scratched his head, trying to make sense of it. So what was this place actually for? What did it want from him? And most importantly, why were there all those weird quests, level-ups, and strange events after he left here? It didn't add up. He felt like he was stuck in some kind of video game. But the rules kept changing. This was Jin-Woo's chance to finally get some answers, and the thought sent a surge of excitement through him. Thump, thump, thump. His heart pounded in his chest, like a jackhammer. This thing seemed to know everything. Jin-Woo stayed on high alert but asked in a hushed tone, "Are you the one who brought me here?" He couldn't help but wonder what was the connection between this mysterious system and the statue. "Yes," the angel statue replied. Its voice was calm as it flexed its fingers, testing how they moved. "You've made it back safely." The angel stretched its neck with a loud crackling sound. Crack crack. Then another sharp crick. It was clear why it had been still for a long time. Usually Jin-Woo would jump into battle right away. But this time he hesitated. He had so many questions for the angel, and didn't want to miss his chance by fighting it. "Are you a magic beast?" The magical energy coming from the statue felt different from what he'd sensed in magic beasts before. Sure, here's a fun and engaging rewrite of your text. But here's the thing, humans made up the term magic beast anyway. If it means all monsters, then this talking, moving statue definitely fits the bill. Jin-Woo wondered if the statue was just another type of magic beast after all. Huss! Cry! 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 Cries! The angel statue bent down to touch its toes and then popped back up like it was warming up for a workout. You're asking the wrong question. It said suddenly. Wund. Jin-Woo frowned, confused. You should be asking who Ajiskura instead of who I am. Jin-Woo froze, stunned by the statue's words. But then the angel clapped its hands loudly to grab his attention. Crap, alright. This will be your final test, the statue announced, stretching like an athlete getting ready for a big match. Its cheerful smile faded into a serious look. If you're still standing after this test, I'll tell you everything. Let me know if you'd like further adjustments. Alright, let's make this exciting. The angel snapped its fingers, and the other statue's eyes lit up with a creepy red glow. Consider this your reward, it said with a sly smile. Suddenly all the stone figures turned their heads toward Jin-Woo. With a loud thud, they hopped off their pedestals, weapons at the ready. Jin-Woo scanned each one calmly. Even though these were just statues brought to life, they looked super tough and had nearly beaten him before. No problem, Jin-Woo thought. He waved his hand casually, and shadowy soldiers popped out of nowhere. Let's do this, he urged them. Ping! The battlefield erupted in a storm of steel and stone. Swords clashed, sparks flew everywhere, and the ground trembled under their feet. Jin-Woo dodged, and weaved through the chaos like a pro. These statues were strong, but they weren't invincible. He was ready to take them down one by one. Meanwhile, a message popped up in front of him. Reminder, no special skills or potions allowed during this test. Just you and your wits. Jin-Woo smirked. Bring it on. Jin-Woo discovered that all the experience points and items he'd earned from leveling up and completing quests had vanished. Then another message popped up. You're stuck here until the final test ends. He glared at the messages, but there was no time to worry about them now. The statue sprang to life, moving swiftly and silently, completely different from the chaotic swarm of knights he'd faced during his job change quest. So that's how it's gonna be, huh? All the potions and rewards he'd gathered just in case were useless now. The system was totally onto Jin-Woo's moves by now. Fine, I'll ace this test on my own. Jin-Woo clutched his daggers tightly. The fastest way to end this mess was to destroy the angel statue controlling everything. But if Jin-Woo did that, he wouldn't get what he came here for. That was his backup plan, so first he would go along with it and take the test. All of this was leading up to this moment. Jin-Woo had kept pushing himself to get stronger, ready to handle anything that came his way. He let out a deep breath, the warm air misting as he exhaled. Before those statues moved so quickly, it looked like they were disappearing and reappearing. Jin-Woo dodged another attack with ease. A spear came at him from the left, and he blocked it with his dagger thwack. Another statue jumped off the attacker's shoulder, swinging its axe downward. Instead of trying to block it, Jin-Woo twisted his body in a quick half-circle to avoid the strike. Crash! The axe slammed into the ground, sending stone shards flying everywhere. Seizing the moment, Jin-Woo kicked the statue's face with all his strength. Crack! The head burst into pieces. Then he heard a sharp hiss-swish, as an arrow zipped past him, lodging in the wall behind.